The In Conversation podcast series, with author Nigel Beckles.
Welcome to the podcast.
Please like the podcast and subscribe to this channel. Thank you. The very best way to promote your podcasts, Podpage makes it easy to create a podcast website with just a few clicks. Every page is optimized to be found on Google and it stays up to date forever. For more information, visit podpage.com, the future of podcast promotion.
Have you experienced several failed relationships or been through a divorce? How can you avoid making the same mistakes again? How to avoid making the big relationship mistakes is out now.
Hi, my name is Nigel Beckles. My new book is packed with practical and common sense strategies that you can use to make better relationship choices.
Now you can discover the dangerous myths about love. If your relationship expectations are realistic, why you could be falling in love for all the wrong reasons.
How to avoid making the big relationship mistakes. It's a book that could change your life.
Available from amazon.co.uk. Kindle version also available.
When the Mood is Right, a poetry journey and mood swings by Queen P. Available on Amazon and all good bookstores.
The Royal Affair
by Queen P.
Dim the lights, sit back, relax, and breathe. You have entered into the Royal Affair.
Queen P. Poetry podcasts, available now.
The Royal Affair.
Get ready for takeoff.
Welcome back to my In Conversation podcast series. My guest for this episode is an award-winning sociology professor and author, American Dr. Mirella Baker Bemmel. Hi Mirella, welcome to my podcast series. How are you?
I'm wonderful, Nigel, and thank you so much for having me.
You're very welcome. Where are you living at the moment?
I live in South Florida. Normally I would say sunny South Florida, but it's a little bit cloudy today.
So did you grow up there?
I did not. Actually, I grew up in Suriname, which is in South America. Used to be Dutch Guyana. So my native language is actually Dutch. But I moved here when I was about 20.
Well, I understand you facilitate workshops helping people with relationship issues, also communication and self-development. When did you become interested in that type of work?
Well, it's been a while. I actually have a background in psychology and sociology. I am a full-time sociology professor. And as a result, I am always in touch with people who come to me for all kinds of conversation and advice. And there came a point when I started to facilitate workshops, and time went by and I realized that there was more and more requests that were coming in for certain workshops, really specifically dealing with relationships. And I tapped my former colleague's shoulder who retired, and I said, hey, what about if we start a business? And we did. We started a business together and have been facilitating workshops and seminars on professional and personal development ever since. So it's been growing, and really we have seen things evolve. But the question always remains, what can I do to better myself? And it seems like people really want that guidance.
Well, everyone goes through challenging times in their lives. How do you suggest we maintain a positive attitude when things are getting difficult to cope with?
You know, Nigel, this is something that we have to look in the mirror and start with ourselves. We cannot try to get happiness from outside. So even though times are challenging, we have to make it a priority and really be very intentional about the choices we make. Even the television shows we watch, if it's too stressful, we need to turn it off. But if we start the day with the positive intentions and a positive attitude, even when things are not exactly where we want them to be, we can always find the good things that are happening and be grateful for those. Having that gratitude really helps me get through the day quite a bit, even when things are not going so well. There's always something that is a silver lining in any story.
So why do you think some people like to compete with others regarding their lifestyle?
You know, this competition is something that's almost like force-fed to us on a daily basis. There's always the push for something better. You buy a phone today, there's a new phone that comes out tomorrow. And The competition is sometimes based in not knowing who we are, and we think that there's something else that's going to make us happy. It might be that we're just really not very secure. So the insecurity, if I don't show off this beautiful car, people are going to think less of me. So people sometimes look outside for others to basically give them the nod of approval and maybe an elevation in their status, and think like, hey, if they can drive this beautiful car, they must be wealthy, they must be happy. But unfortunately, we oftentimes look on the outside instead of on the inside to make those improvements, and that's not necessarily where we need to be. So the competition is unfortunately going to hurt us more than it will help.
So do you think a consumer culture has kind of persuaded people to compete?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. And as a matter of fact, when you start to look at holidays, we'll start with something as simple as Christmas, where the foundation of what that's about is oftentimes lost in consumerism. And it's not just that people want to buy a gift for someone because they think, oh, you know what, I'm just trying to be nice. But it's competing like, oh, if I buy something bigger and better, they will think of me as, nicer and richer, and might appreciate me more because now I have something that I've given to them. So it almost gets lost in translation when people get caught up in that consumerism, and it's very easy to do because we get bombarded with commercials on the television, etc., all the time.
Well, abundance comes in many forms. So how do you suggest people begin to build an abundant life?
That goes back to being intentional and making sure that we don't get swallowed by the things that get thrown at us regularly, which is normal, right? I mean, we're now in a very interesting time of this pandemic. We can sit here and be very upset about the situation and not being able to go out and live life to the fullest like we normally would. Or we can turn the switch and say, I'm going to be intentional about how I perceive things and what I do on a day-to-day basis. Because having an abundant life starts with our mindset. We might be ill, but what can we do to either overcome it or still enjoy things, even though they might be a little bit different than the way they had been in the past? We might be divorced. We might have gone through some very serious issues in life, loss of a loved one, for example. But what do we do to get to the other side? Of course, we can't just pretend that it didn't happen. We have to deal with the anxiety, and we have to make sure that if we can't do it on our own, that we seek help from a professional. But at the end of the day, we have to realize that it starts with us. Living an abundant life is not going to happen automatically. We need to make choices to make our lives abundant.
Well, you also advise people on their relationships. What do you believe are the biggest challenges in that area?
Well, any relationship, whether it's an intimate relationship, a relationship with your friend, with your boss, with your family member, it comes down to several things. One of the first and foremost important areas within a relationship would be communication, and that we need to make sure that we understand one another by listening and giving the other person the respect that they deserve, but also making sure that they do the same. It's not a one-way street, right? Respect is mutual. Communication should also go in both directions. And then ultimately, when it comes to any kind of relationship, we need to make sure that we allow people to be who they are rather than expecting them to change for us. And especially with intimate relationships, you see women sometimes thinking, oh, I'll get into this relationship and I'll change them. We can't change anyone, right? We can only change ourselves. So that, accepting people for who they are and being kind. Being kind is so important. Outdo each other with kindness. It's a beautiful thing.
You're also an author. So what is your book called and what is it about?
Yes, I am an author. My book is called Building Blocks to an Abundant Life, Design the Life You Desire. The book is really taking a look at our lives and making a comparison to how we would remodel our house if we don't like something in the house. Say, for example, if you don't like the way the kitchen looks, we would be quick to remodel the kitchen. Well, our life is the same way. And if we take a good look at our life and we maybe compare it to a house, we start to realize that there are rooms or windows or pillars or walls, the roof, etc., that we can take a close look at. And so I do a comparison to, for example, pillars. And I say, in a house, you would have pillars. And in our life, our pillars would be things like honesty and empathy, fairness, etc. And so if there's an area in our life that we're not necessarily happy with, we can make an intentional change by doing that deep reflection, making sure that we understand where those issues started to maybe go a little bit different than we desire, and then making a plan to make the changes that we want by remodeling. And so it's not something that we can do overnight. It might take years for someone to work on themselves, but we have to look inward and make those changes so that ultimately we can live a life that's more abundant, but it's intentional. It's not going to just happen by itself.
So, Mirella, how can people contact you?
Well, they can email me by going to achieve@nextleveleducatorsllc.com, or they can go to my website, which is nextleveleducators.com.
Mirella in Florida, USA, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Nigel. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe. Another In Conversation podcast coming soon.